But they're gonna, as we talk, they'll get to share who they are and where they come from. Sugar Bear back there is our sound guru for the day. If you will unmute the gentleman, please. Oh, there it is. So if you can't hear, just tap it. There might be some minor adjustments. I'm Miguel Hampton. I am a small business owner, father, husband, and I talk a lot. And I talk all different type of directions. So things that I do well and I don't do well. So one thing I don't do well is I don't spell well. One thing I do really well is I splice words. I will take a whole sentence and create a new word. So those are my gifts. So if that happens up here, just nod your head and be like, yeah, he did that. I do have a bad mouth, like I cuss a lot, but I'm surrounded by ministers today, so I'm gonna do my best. And they would say, do what you would do when your mama's sitting there, and I'd be like, we all in trouble. This conversation came about, the Mike hit me up earlier this year. We were talking about doing an event, and we started talking about what it's like to be black men and where our youth are, and the struggles that they see living in Southern Indiana, the struggles that we see happening in Kentucky. And so we were like, we should put an event on, let's figure out what that looks like. And so I do a handful of other symposiums where it's called Common Conversation. And, there's nothing off limits. So whether we're talking about mental health, whether we're talking about women's advocacy, whether we're talking about the aunt that walked across the yard and carrying a cat, we're gonna have that conversation and it's real. And so our speakers typically get to share what they wanna share and what they don't. And I've always wondered, because I come from a single mom who was in multiple abusive relationships, and I grew up watching that. And Norm and I have had some really cool conversations about life and growing up and mentoring and what it looks like to be around men and things like that. And so I'm gonna share a little bit of my sensitivities. I'm gonna pull back some layers. So I don't deal well with men. Haven't for years. Now that has changed as I've gotten older. And that a lot of that has to stem from not seeing positive black male role models, or the traditional or ideology, the ideal black role model, whatever that is. I grew up around abusive men who happened to be mostly pastors. And so this is a fun dynamic for me, because I respect these men. And it's taken me a long time to get to this point. I grew up around some gangbangers, I grew up around some drug dealers, but I grew up mostly around a lot of good black women. And so, and that, got me to a certain point. And then all of a sudden, I came around some really strong men. And I remember the first time I met John here, that was a long time ago, he don't remember. But I met him 6 years ago at GLI. And this dude walked past me and gave me this cool business card that had wood on it, and it was flexible. I said, what in the hell? I was like, oh, this is dope. And then just listening to him talk, I was inspired. Right, and then a couple years later, we're sitting at St. Stephen's in Sunday school, and comes John Gunn. So I was like, oh, okay. And so we're good. Our relationships, what you say?
He said, I know he was going to say something about me. He said, that's when I was in regular attendance.
So the fun part is I met Norm, though. I met Norm at a friend of my wife's house at a cookout. Him and his wife, and we sat there, and they was like this cool black couple from Mississippi. And I ain't met too many people from Mississippi that was cool. And so, I don't know, years later, the second time we meet during the mood, I think that's impactful. So there's times that we meet people, and there's times that it's impactful, right? Is that we had a salsa business that we were in the merge of closing or trying to raise money for. And out of all the people I knew to help us raise money to get this business back off the ground were these two strangers. And that was a blessing. So we closed the business, but the fact is I got two really great family members and two really great friends. But the dynamics of when we meet people and how that impact happens. Blackford, man, this dude ordered some kind of crazy smoothie. Norm's like, I got this brother you need to meet. So if you don't know, I carry, and so Norm's like, he's just like you. Y'all need to get together. So we drove out to somewhere in East Lowell, and this dude came in and ordered. What did you order, man. It was something odd and strange, but it was a smoothie in that shop. But this cat, man, he drove up on his little white motorcycle. I don't even think it's a motorcycle because it's a cab. That's it. You got 3 wheels.
Cab.
Yeah. So, you know, just hearing his story, they all gonna share it. And then, cool part is I met Tim a couple times, but I met his father first when I was at Incentives. And your dad was super cool. And then I met him in passing a couple times, but we really got a chance to talk when we did the Black Panther movie. So I got invited by Angelique Johnson to come do photographs and recreate the Black Panther poster when they were doing the premiere. And just wow. So I'm looking forward to get to know him better. But this cat, y'all already know who he is. He's amazing. So heck of an impact. But yeah, so I'm excited, because now I'm rambling, to have these cats on here, because I have private conversations. Now we get to have an open private conversation. So we're gonna start out, I'm gonna throw out a couple of words, and who wants to go first? I'm gonna throw out a couple of words.
I go first.
Right.
You know who wants to go first. I go first. We know.
So I'm gonna throw out a couple of words. So some of these things I got from them, and some of them ain't. And so what I told them is I'm scatterbrained. Tia will tell you, my wife, is that I will write a speech and then do something else. So I got 3 pages of notes. We might do something else.
3 pages of notes from this week,
Yes.
because he had some other pages of notes before we even started this week.
So Blackford hit me with a statement one day, and I'm still a little dumbfounded by it. And when he first said it, I was lightweight offended. And then when I came back and really processed it, I said, man, he is spot on. And I ain't researching, because I was waiting for him to explain it. So we were sitting in your basement, bro. You said something about masculine and feminine energy. Write that down for me.
Norm can go first.
So that wasn't my statement. But I think I understood it. Go ahead, Blackford.
What we were talking about in the context of raising boys and raising young women, young girls to be women, I was talking about the concept of masculine and feminine energy. Boys need masculine energy. They need something to bump up against. They need something to model after. And if boys don't encounter masculine energy, then they adopt feminine energy. What does that mean? That literally means that they begin to respond like women to certain issues. The problem with them responding like women to certain issues is that women don't respect them and men don't respect them either. Men need respect. That's one of the traits that men have to have. You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with me, but you will respect me. And if men don't have respect, what happens is they act out in ways that are contrary to their value system, contrary to what is productive. They become destructive instead of productive. And so when they have masculine energy, you now begin to guide that energy because they need something to bump up against. They need large muscle movements. They need to be spoken to in a way that speaks to deep into their particular soul. And one of the ways that I picked up on this, because when I grew up in a household, my father was gone when I was 3. That causes a lot of trauma in a child's life, and they react to that particular trauma. My trauma was reduced because the moment my father left, we moved in with my grandmother. My grandfather was there, all my uncles were there. So I had that masculine energy. When we left there, my stepfather was already in place. So I had that masculine energy to reduce my particular trauma. But I see the way that I responded and the way people responded when men spoke versus responded when the women spoke in the household. And there was a different energy. There was a different energy. And I seen when those two energies combined that it produced something radically different, simplistic, and beautiful at the same time, because they flowed together in a way that created a sense of calm and peace. So when I talk about that masculine energy and feminine energy, I'm talking about two people who are different, and I think we need to acknowledge that they're different, but when they flow together, it's a force to be reckoned with.
Y'all want to chime in? Y'all want to jump in?
Well, I agree with you. I'm gonna agree with you. but you know, it's very interesting that you say that, because I see that quite often. And I mentor a few people, and I didn't want to mentor these people. They just forced me to mentor them, and I was okay with that. This one young man, high voice, and I'm okay with high voices, but he had, his ways were very effeminate. And I stopped, I talked with him, he asked me, because he wants to get into the aviation industry, and I said, are you living with your mom? He said, really? Yeah. I said, okay. I said, where's your father? He said, I don't know. And that let me know, that really kind of solidifies what Blackford was talking about. If you don't have a male figure around for your male sons, it does create some different energy. And this kid, but he's seeking, he loves me, because we're talking all the time. Every time we see him, we stop, we talk, because I'm invested actually in his future success. I want him to be successful in what he's doing, but I still want him to understand what the masculinity is all about.
There's a book that I was reading recently, and it's an amazing book. I think it's Madeline O'Hare and her husband, but it's called The Unisexualization of Black Men, the unisexualization and the effeminization of Black men and the endangered Black family. And in this book, the reason why I find it so interesting is because she doesn't take a homophobic sort of bent. She deals with society's weaponizing of a message to deconstruct the Black family. That's a very, very interesting thing, and I agree with all the brothers on the panel. Part of the challenge that I have, and I have a 18 now, as of Thursday, I have an 18-year-old daughter. We were just in New York City during Pride Week, Times Square. So you can imagine that's
Huge.
very colorful scenery. Yeah. And her thought process is almost one of defeat. And that is, there aren't any, it's almost as if she's not used to seeing strong Black men, with the exception of her family members, and maybe some figures on television, because society, because movies, because music, the picture of Black men nowadays is one of almost just this androgyny. So I think the challenge that we have as leaders, as pastors, as community folk, is finding really where this is starting to impact young people and trying to recover sort of the mold of what masculinity is all about. Even watching TV, and I'm still, maybe these brothers can help me, I don't quite know what toxic masculinity is. I get the concept, but even that alone has been weaponized to where now, if you have a young man, and this has happened to me, and he starts, whatever, and you say, hey man, you need to man up. And then the mother comes in and says, I don't like that. That is, it's a point now to where I think we went to a whole different level. And I think absolutely it is affecting the Black family, no question. I think that it's purposeful. I think it's, again, been weaponized. I think that if we're not careful, we in particular are going to see a generation of black boys and black men that will have no sense of care for pushing what the traditional black family has been. That's my 2 cents.
But also, could you look at that in terms of the struggle or the identity a different way and go with a different type of energy, saying that I come from a single parent family. My mother raised with all the girls. My dad left when I was 12. And I had a circle of influence, probably football coaches, basketball coaches, and that. And I looked at their family structure and I said, okay, the man needs to step up. So at 12, I say somebody's got to help my mother. She's working 2 jobs. So we took some classes at the vocational school to learn how to overhaul lawnmower engines. We bought lawnmowers. We created a business. And so for that, it gave me the ownership to be the man of the house, even though I was number 8. So with that, we sold the business, bought my mother a house before I went to college. Then from that point on, I knew that entrepreneurship was my thing. So I used that energy and said, okay, I look at other spheres of influence, even though my home had been dysfunctional. There were other homes that I saw, whether it was the Jewish community and other places where I said, wow, I would like to mimic that behavior. And I think sometimes we can sometimes use it as an excuse versus saying, how do we use that for positive energy? To be the best John I can be, to help and take on that ownership. So me not having a childhood, though, kind of, now I'm a big kid. So then I create some issues, probably with my kids, my wife, things like that, because I have fun every day.
That's okay.
Man, you're supposed to do that though, right?
I'm still a child too.
I have fun every day. So,
But I mean, so you said something about toxic masculinity, and what is that? And I'm curious about what that is too. And I know in my upbringing, the difference was, so when I was little, when I was with my father, for me to cry meant I was a punk, or excuse the 3 words, fag, or pussy. Like, we don't do that, right? And so, anytime I had any line of emotion, it was squashed, right? But then you have this other piece, when we were disciplined, we was beaten with ball bats, or we were locked in closets, or attics, or we were thrown across rooms. So for me, if in the beginning, I'm like, okay, this is what my father is teaching me to be, right? So I'm mimicking the very thing I see. My stepfather wasn't much different, right? So when I think about toxic masculinity, I remember one time my mother was cooking. It was directly after church. We were in AME church, and church was connected to the parsonage, so we could just go, from one door to the other, and we was home. And so church was over, mom came home, started cooking, and dinner wasn't on time. And I remember watching my stepfather just punch her straight across the face. Right? That's normal. That's life. Right? And so when I think, how do you deal with women? How do you engage other people? To me, that's a toxic. That's the masculinity that we're teaching our young men. I got a daughter, and I think,
My bad.
hey, important people, their phones go off. That's how I go down. Can I answer?
But something that I think is important, and I'm glad you said that, because I think it's a challenge across the spectrum of how we think about things. Oftentimes, our concept of anything is associated with what we've experienced in the past. So your concept of toxic masculinity, which absolutely would be toxic, I think there is a rush from a society standpoint, to take those horror stories and then make all forms of discipline that even may look like, resemble anything from a person's concept from the past, we make that the present thing.
Okay.
So, and I think that's the challenge, because again, I grew up in a 2-parent house. My father was very, very much structured when it came to identity. I can guarantee you now, my father was loving, my father was a provider. The way that he fathered me would be looked at as abusive today. No question. No question. So that's where now you have to look at what our concepts are. And it's toxic masculinity being birthed from people or a person that has a horror story and saying, because this is my individual story, anything that resembles this, I'm going to rally against it. It's no different than a young lady or a young man who's dating, has an abusive relationship. So the first time her new relationship even shows remote signs of any level of a raised voice, she automatically goes back to the past. Whether there is, and I think that's where we get in trouble. And that's certainly not to minimize. I think that would be toxic masculinity, but just, that goes to the church. A church pastor from the sticks or wherever stole some offering money. So now my view of every single church everywhere is the pastor stealing all the money. That's how we as humans, I think we adapt to things, and it's, the question is, has the traditional fatherhood, is that now antiquated? Is it no longer applicable, respected, necessary for today?
I agree with Tim. You don't want to normalize that particular behavior, but you definitely want to isolate and remove that type of behavior. I want to zero in on that type of behavior that Miguel described in his particular childhood, and I want to provide the proper corrective measure for that particular behavior, because in no type of way should we advocate a man punching your wife in the face, and definitely would never work for me. Because my wife is 6 foot, she would punch me in my face. There she goes, she's sitting right there. It'd have been on. Right. So I think in highlighting those stories, we want to see that just like you do any other type of disease, any other type of sickness. We want to provide the right type of medicine so that we can help people to heal and overcome. Those who have the sickness and those who are affected by that particular sickness. The beautiful part about this story is that he didn't repeat that same pattern. That's the beautiful part of that story. And then what did he do? And I think John, you added flavor to it. You said, man, I'm not going to repeat the same behavior that I've seen. You practice a sense of agency. Yes. And I think we need to empower people who have been hurt. Like for example, I don't agree with the phrase, and Tim will understand this, and those of you who are part of the church understand it, this whole concept of church hurt. I don't agree with that, because there's too many examples in the Bible where you have to go to someone and you can heal from that. I think we use that as an excuse not to do what God wants us to do, because we don't like the person, or we want to stay stuck in our comfort zone, or we want to stay stuck in our past. When we could use that agency that John talked about and now create something new, create something different. Even that whole concept of being an entrepreneur. When you think about it, if you carry that on to the next level, you could be an entrepreneur when it comes to social issues. I can start something new. I could be an entrepreneur when it comes to my mindset. I can be an entrepreneur when it comes to my emotional intelligence. I want to now create something new that I can now share with the people around me, from the good things that I've learned with the people around me.
It's interesting that nobody would know that my father was mean as hell, because he beat the hell out of me and my sisters and brothers, just kind of like what happened with you, Tim.
No, mine was good.
Well, no.
Positive bad.
We're good.
He's got to say that because you know you're watching that. But my dad fought my mom. I mean, they were in Jackson Park, Mississippi, down where we were in Moss Point. The Seawright household was known for the fights that the parents had. It was crazy. And then there were 6 girls and 2 boys, and somebody might ask the question, well, why didn't I turn out like my dad? Well, it's a choice, right? 1, it's a choice. 2, My older sister said, you better not be like that. you know, but I had some influence. But my father was a really good provider. And he provided for the household. But I did not want to be, I wasn't afraid of my dad just because I was a masculine dude, you know, and I knew that I was going to grow. But my sisters were kind of afraid of him. And I didn't want my sons to be afraid of me when I got married and had kids. So, you know, besides trying to provide that structure that you guys were speaking of, I also tried to provide some discipline and some love. I made sure that I was hugging on my sons and kissing on them and made sure that they felt secure and to talk to dad, to be around dad, that kind of thing. So I wanted to be a good father, a good husband, and a good producer of society. So I think a lot of it boils down to becoming a choice. What do you really want to be? What do you want to do? And I didn't want to be that guy who the police were going to be chasing in a small town that I grew up in.
So we're gonna shift a little bit, but I'm gonna touch. So for me, it was, man, you know, all my fathers, my mother was married multiple times, and so I'll add these and we can talk more in depth. But so my mother is from Panama. She was born in Panama and came to the United States when she was a kid. And my great grandmother told my grandmother that if you married as African American male, you're gonna ruin your life. And so my grandmother told my mother the same thing. Right? They both married African American men, and both their lives, for the most part, were really rough. And so I saw that whole cycle. Well, here's the fun part, right? I'm an African American male. I'm born in America, right? By the way of Panama. And I'm like, yo, I don't want to be that dude. I don't want to marry somebody and they mother be like, you marry that dude, you're going to ruin your life. Then I was thinking, you know, as I get older and I have kids, I don't ever want to have a daughter and have to look at her and look at some dude and be like, yo, you marry that dude, you're going to ruin your life. Right? Or have a son and teach him that same thing. So I consciously had to say, you know, although it was a very negative situation, what happened to me as a child is the most positive thing that I've ever done, because it is who I am. And much of the things that I've done since then are because of my past, not in spite of it.
Okay.
And so I think that's important that we look at it that way. But I say that because for a very long time, I really wasn't sure what a positive African American man actually looked like. Because most of my friends were white. And I hung out with their white parents, and they couldn't tell me, right? And so the cats that I ran with that were black were in the hood. Nothing wrong with that, because they were some of the best people I ever ran with. Even though they might have been dope dealers or gangbangers, because they held me in a different light than they held themselves because of where I came from. So I say that because, and I'm gonna jump on two things. I say that because I wonder, you know, for black men, what does, in a colonial Anglo-Saxon world, what does the black family really look like? Because I see so many black families mimic a white society, and that's not really our culture in our way. So how do we find success in that? That's just an open question, folks.
If I look at my family structure, I mean, you know, a lot of things, everyone's kind of independent to some degree. I allow my children a lot of flexibility. And to the point where my son is 18, my wife's been on him about getting a job. And I'm like, let him enjoy his summer. And John, what do you like doing? And he tell me what he like doing. I like playing video games, things like that. So I said, why don't you create a business? So we ran a dining hall. We had game night, charge interest. I mean, it's entry fees. He's selling sodas, you're doing this. Now he doesn't have to go to work. But so my thing is always that if you're passionate about something.
Let me say this, I love John. Can I say that? But we don't start a business out of anything. I love it, good.
But I think what it looks like, I don't look at my neighbors do something totally different. I'm the only black in my neighborhood, and now we just moved in, and I go there, and my wife said that wasn't a proper introduction. I take a bottle of booze over there and some flowers for his wife. So then we start talking, and he said, well, I don't drink. But I said, okay, you don't mind if I drink. But you know,
I'll just take this bottle back with me.
but I mean, I guess it's just being a free spirit.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, I'm not trying to mimic what's on television. I just, when you know, you look at that, success for me is happy doing what you choose to do.
Okay. Excellent. It's real, and you have to be real. I try to take all the good stuff that I enjoy about being raised in Mount Swan, Mississippi, in my mom and dad's household, and bring it to my household. You know, the stuff with the fighting and the person, that's my baby boy right there, sitting over there. And he's 6'2", 235, whatever, and he's big as I am. But when he was a little baby, I remember I raised my voice and said something, and he just started screaming, and I was like, what's wrong? He said, you yelling at me. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to yell, but I need you to do this. You know? I got a big voice, and I had to learn, because my wife said the same thing to me one time. She said, you yelling, man? I'm not yelling. I grew up in the country. But
Not a lady cup.
that's right. But the thing was is that doing, I think those things that were naturally good at home, I enjoy. You know, don't forget the family prayer, which every Sunday morning, you know, my mama would get up and cook all this food, and all 10 of us had to come around the table and say the Lord's Prayer, and then we had to say a verse. Everybody had to learn a Bible verse to say it, and I remember that. I was like, I like that. I want to incorporate that. And we just try to take it a little bit further, and as far as, you know, them working, we wouldn't let them get a job after school because we told them school was your job. We want you to have a great education. We want you to do well in school. And now when the summer came and Lou kept them in school. She kept them educated. She kept them going. So it was just, what's a successful black family? I can't put a stereotype to it. Okay. And I can't say that it's going to look like what my counterparts, my white colleagues' family look like. It's different. It's very different, but it's uniquely ours.
Okay.
I guess I'll answer it differently. I think one of the challenges for me is that it seems as though at times the weight of portraying what a successful black family should be falls on successful black families. And I don't know.
Tim, when you say successful, what do you mean?
Well, that's what I mean. Well, that's what I'm gonna get to is that I don't know what that looks like.
Right.
You know, I think that we are, as a race of people, expected to produce this model that really are there parameters? Are there details? I don't know. I mean, is that just having a mom and a father in the home? Is that just having them, even if it's a single parent home, having a great job and putting the kids through school? I think there are so many different ways of looking at this. To be honest, nowadays a successful black family could be, you know, your child not getting killed by the police.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just depending on where you are. What I'd like to see for me personally, you know, I'd like to see success in the world in terms of being able to provide for the family, whether that is living, whether that is education. But I don't know. That's just a very, very challenging question. I think it's deeply individual, but there are almost responsibilities on every black family to sort of carry this sort of weight almost to say, hey, we got this Cosby thing on. And is that the thing? So that's a whole lot of talking, but I don't know.
I like it though.
Let me answer it a different way. I finished up my undergraduate degree in West Africa. While we were there, my wife was with me. She wasn't my wife at the time. While we were there, we were in a class, and the professor was speaking, and he was speaking about having children and how children are a gift and how children carry on the legacy of the particular family. And one of my friends spoke up and she said, I'm not going to have children. He said, I'm not going to have children. He paused, stopped the class, looked at her and said, you being the best that your race has to offer, you would rob the world of having more people like you. So when you ask that question around successful black family, I think success in the construct of family. Family understood in two ways. Number one, family understood in the nuclear way, where it's mother, father, children. Family understood in the communal way, where it takes a village to raise a child. I think when you think about successful families, those that you are born into and those you choose should nurture your potential, help you to discover your purpose, and push you out so that you make the world better than what you found it. So whatever that family looks like, whether it's a single mom, whether it is a single father, whether it is two parents struggling together, whatever that looks like, it should help to push you out into your purpose. It should protect you for your purpose, number one. Protect you for your purpose, but always speaking in terms where you are going to make this world a better place. And I think when you understand family in the nuclear way and family in the communal way, I think our children will not escape that, nor will the struggle of marriage escape that, because marriage is hard, it's difficult, it's challenging. Nor will a single mother escape that, because we will see it as our responsibility to help them survive, to help empower them, to help them make it. So if it's a single parent, and I got my stuff together over here financially, I come alongside them and say, yo, look, here's what we can do. Let's partner together, because you're part of the community. You're part of this whole community. You communal family. And that can look different, and I don't even think that's, when we say successful black family, I don't even think that's a black thing. I think that it should be a human thing, where we now seek an opportunity to partner with people, to empower them, to live a purpose and a life that makes this world better than what we see. Now, and if you are destructive the same way, we should check your butt. That's just bottom line. If you destructive in front of me, man, it's my responsibility and my obligation to check your butt right where we at.
Right now.
Right now, because again, how do you experience that corrective if I see you being destructive and I say nothing? There's no correction there. If you are destroying everything people have died for you to experience and build up, then if I don't step in and provide some type of corrective measure to redirect you, then I'm culpable.
Shame on you.
So let me ask you this: how and when, in maybe 30 seconds, how and when do we begin to sow a seed in young black men of what the expectation for them to be when they mature? Can I ask it that way? Anybody can tell me.
Well, I see that from I'm just saying, I'm going to say from birth, but I'm going to say whenever you meet them, whenever it starts. I really agree with what Blackford was saying about having the obligation and responsibility and commitment actually to be able to assist where you can. You know what I mean? We are blessed to become blessings to others. And I think if I have the wherewithal and the mindset to be able to say to a young brother, come here, man, let me talk. Let's talk. Let's go. Let me buy you some lunch, and let's sit down and talk. And if he's going to give me that kind of attention, then I'm going to try to pour something into them that's going to help him to be better in life. That's just my thing.
I think it's to parlay on what Nolan and I both said. I think it's a partnership. I think as kids, partnership and trust. You can people get through to me that I trust. I trust Nolan. I trust you. And when you trust people, I think beautiful things happen. My son trusts that I'm going to show him the way if he fails, so he's not afraid to take risks. I knew that, just like my daughter, I pushed her through education, through school, and I knew that she loved to just make things beautiful. So now she does cosmetology. So I think for me, it's trust. As I told you, I think it's every one of my clients, they deal with me because they trust me. It's not just a business transaction. And I think that's one of the hang-ups as well of us and the Black community, because we don't trust them.
So but that's an, I lightly disagree. That's a narrative that we continue to say. Because here's the thing. We all sit in this room and we just define what trust looks like to a certain degree. And even when things are wrong, we're still teaching each other how to trust. But when we talk business sometimes, the first thing we say, well, Black businesses in our community don't grow because Black people don't trust each other. White people don't trust us either, right? And so we keep saying the same narrative over and over again. And now it is intrinsic at how we function. So we see another Black man and we immediately don't trust him. I don't necessarily know that's true.
Well, let me add color to your commentary.
Okay.
Because I think John is right.
Okay.
In that the reason why we don't trust. You got to read Tom Burrell's book Brainwash. Tom Burrell in his book Brainwash articulates how we, both Black and white, have been fed a systematic marketing propaganda to equate Blackness with inferiority. He chronicles the whole piece from slavery to Reconstruction to civil rights to this current era. That's why the unconscious bias of white police officers who shoot unarmed men is activated or has been weaponized. Because unconsciously, we equate Blackness with inferiority. That's both Black people and that's both white people. Okay. So that whole trust piece is a real big piece. Because just think about it. If in fact we were able, I'm from New York, right? They got Chinatown in New York. Man, they got a place with Jews, different Jews. A Hasidic Jew, an Italian Jew, and if they want to get something done, they don't go to Black people, they don't go to the Chinese, they go to another Jewish person. Okay. They got their own economy. Where's Blacktown?
You sitting in it.
And my question, if we did trust each other, we would at least do business with one another in ways where we would have our own economy, and there's nothing wrong with that, because when you operate from a place of power and you sit down at the table, you don't sit down as an inferior, you sit down as an equal. We are too busy sitting down as inferiors, and we asking for jobs when we should be creating jobs. I'll never forget what this woman said. One mother said in a school, the teacher was talking, and they were talking about the child doing good in order to get a job. She paused, Black woman, she paused and said, I'm not sending my child here to get a job. I'm sending my child here to create jobs. That's a whole nother mindset. Yeah. That's a whole nother way of thinking and empowering and weaponizing us to the point where we begin to have care for one another. So I agree with John. This whole ideology around Blackness is inferior is a lie, but it's a lie that we all have believed as the truth.
So how do we
I want to add to that, and I agree with you. everything you said, and just to sort of take it in this way, because I think there's two ways of looking at this. There's the micro, there's the macro.
Yes.
I think we're talking about on a micro level, going to these young black boys, changing the narrative, changing the way that they view these lies that have been fed by whether it's media, pop culture, whatever the case may be. That's the micro level. But I do think there's something to be said about the macro issue. And the macro issue to me really is looking at social justice. There's two books that come to mind, and I appreciate these brothers on the panel that are all readers, and I think we all, that's a very important thing. There's one called The Color of Law. There's actually a young brother, a young white guy here in the city, or in Louisville, named Josh Pope. He does an amazing presentation on redlining in Louisville, because we walk around with the notion that because, you know, we black, we in the hood, and we gotta clean up the hood. There was an absolute plan for the West End to be the West End. And what we're dealing with today was not an accident. And not only was it not an accident, he chronicles in there that the color of law is, as long as there are certain power structures in place, it will always be that until that's broken down. The other book by Carolyn Anderson is called White Rage. It goes back to Jim Crow, goes back to Reconstruction, Deconstruction, slave, all of that. I think from a macro level, even going back to the last question, successful black families, successful black men, successful black women, it is incumbent on us to speak to systematic injustices that are alive and well today, that are keeping crabs in the barrel. And I use that term because I hate that term so much. We often use that in the black community about crabs in the barrel, crabs in the barrel. We can't get anywhere because crabs in the barrel. And then we ignore the fact that how did the crabs get in the barrel? Were crabs ever supposed to be in the barrel? And to me, a part of the challenge, and it's not to make excuses, but we have to be careful with what we hear is respectability politics. Well, if we do this, we'll be treated this way. If, you know, it's like I heard someone say, well, if you don't want to get shot by the cops, young man, you ought to pull your pants up. That's respectability politics. So to be viewed as human, you need to pull your pants up. Well, I don't like people saying, I think it's terrible. But that should not mean that I'm going to lose my life because of that. Yes. And I think in too many things as African Americans, especially when you start to ascend that ladder, we sort of disconnect the micro and the macro. We got to deal with the young brother. We got to go into the schools. We got to invest in programs. We got to try to change the narrative. But we cannot forget that there is a major criminal justice issue. There's a major housing issue. There's a major education issue. I went through a program in Louisville called Leadership Louisville. Yeah. And I went through it just for a resume builder. Could care less about it. It was one of the most eye-opening things I've been through because it showed in Louisville, statistically, African Americans are at the bottom of the list across the board. Education, housing, criminal justice, all of these different things. And yet what happens is we ascend and then we turn around and we don't deal with, hey, this stuff ain't happening just because we ain't good people. They're going back to that narrative. There are some things in place that we have to go against. We have to deal with. We have a president that was elected because, as Carolyn Anderson says, as a direct response to the first black president, that white rage, that you had this, and we want to go so far past that, we're going to put that guy in place. That principle it exists today. And as black people, for black boys, we have got to literally look at that and say, what can we do daily? What can we speak to? How can we come together and deal with these injustices that will continue to perpetuate these issues?
And we got to be careful. We got to be careful just because we made it out the barrel, not to point our finger at the barrel and say, man, this or that, or give our prescription. You know, because I think we have to be, the seeds that we have planted, we have to be moved from just being informative to being inspirational. Yeah. You know, I'm not just going to give you information, I'm going to inspire you. To inspire you, that means I'm connected to you in some way. You got to see me. I got to show up. I got to be active in a way that I'm providing a consistent model of agency so that you can break free from that structure. or that norm or that dysfunctional system.
Real quick, because I want to take some questions from out there, but how do we build trust, real fast?
Well, I think confidence. I think that's one thing that speaks to like trust. If I'm confident that, and I'm willing to take risks. Sometimes when I'm willing to take risks, and say, I want to go trust this person, I'm willing to risk on the line that this thing could go good or go bad. Because that's the normal side. So with me, it's just, I watch a person, their behavior speaks before they speak.
Behavior, yeah, absolutely. Do it without expectation of getting something in return. You know, if I'm invested in your success and your future, I shouldn't be invested in it so that I can get something out of it, or it's going to make me work. It's because it's what you might need at that time, and I'm your boy. I'm gonna help you get it. And if we fail, we're gonna fail together.
I think Doc hit it on the head. I think that we have to be present, and we have to be present for more than just our family group, our family dynamic. If we're going to build that kind of trust, we have to be in those places and showing that we care, and not doing it for a photo op, not doing it for a post on Facebook, but doing it because there's a genuine compassion for our fellow man, fellow woman, fellow family.
Trust is not a noun, it's a verb. You cannot talk your way out of stuff you behaved your way into. But you can behave your way out.
That's the
Preach it tomorrow. Thank you. That's gonna be the sermon of the week.
As we keep talking, anybody have a question? Y'all want to step in? I saw some pins moving. I don't know if that's for you or for us. The floor is open. Y'all welcome to share. So
While we're waiting on questions, you know, we'll talk to the brother, talk about we deal with the micro, and a lot of times we don't deal with the macro. I think sometimes we've got to use creative measures to get around it. You know, I met with a European gentleman last night in a very small community in France. A guy's groomed. If he's bald, there's a certain perception. So whenever I meet with the Europeans, I don't shave. Whenever I go to Asia, I don't represent myself. I send an older 65-year-old white guy because that's trust. So we have to find ways around that to get through and still be successful.
okay.
I like that.
We have to do what we have to do to get the deal. When I go to ground foreman, this is my thing. If I wear a nice suit, I'm overdressed.
But you know what I like about what you said is when I'm in France. You know what I'm saying? Or when I'm in China. That's what I like. He got a passport and he ain't scared to use it.
But we got risks. And sometimes we may have to compromise your position sometimes. And to be successful in the end all and create a win-win situation. We do it with the people we work for, we do it with our families. Anyone that's been married is going to do it. So sometimes we have to do it in the economy, the community, and business.
So the rest of the three of y'all jump on this because it adds. I mean, he's laying. You know, John is laying out values, right? Of his values in terms of how we can become successful. In an economy or in an environment, we look at Southern Indiana and we look at Louisville, where Black folks in general are on the bottom scale. There are not a whole lot of African American executives. There's not a whole lot of African American growing, stable businesses. And I say that because there are a lot of businesses, but those that you can actually take to the next level and build capacity, they typically don't exist. How do we begin to define the value structure to build success in the Black community? Just your opinion, these are opinions. This is a conversation. You ain't got to throw.
Well, let me say that I think the value structure Ruby Payne writes a book, Bridges Out of Poverty, which she engages in what I call victimology. She blames the victim because of their particular issues. She doesn't look at the structural pressures that create poverty. So she looks at and say we need to accept, or we need to teach them middle class values, and which is cold to me, which says we need to teach them to be more white. Right? Well, hard work is not a middle class value. Nobody works as hard as a slave. A slave will work. So when you think about values, we got to build those particular values that now that reinforce behaviors that will put you in a position to be successful. Because again, I think it boils down to those particular values that you are willing to put into practice on a regular basis. If you willing to grind, if you willing to burn the midnight oil, if you willing to be multi-contextual, and that's what John was saying. That means you move from context to context without losing who you are. I'm just as comfortable on a street corner as I am in a corporate boardroom, because I can now, I'm not bilingual, I'm multilingual, because I can speak the different languages, whether it's in dress, whether it's in mannerism, and I don't lose who I am by doing that. In fact, I gain a little bit of information from them that I can now take back to the people who I'm with in order to generate resources that will empower them even further. So when you think about that whole concept of being multi-contextual, and now using who you are in order to position yourself, that's a work ethic. That is and that's not middle class, that's not lower class, that's just what it is. You got to be willing to work. You got to be willing to be creative. You got to be willing to be flexible. Those are behaviors.
But looking at the values too, let's not equate hard work with success. Because we have to work smart.
Smart work.
I can work my ass off, and there's only 24 hours in a day. But if I think I've been guilty of hard work, and I'm just trying to transform my mind to work smart.
So there's a difference between movement and progress. So sometimes working hard, just what you're saying, I work real hard, but I'm not progressing forward.
Yeah, and you wonder, I work my butt off, but I'm just not getting it.
Gotcha.
I want to say something. We were talking earlier. I'm gonna let you. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. A few years back, even before I moved here, I was at a friend's house here in Jeffersonville, and an election time was coming up, and they were playing cards and sitting around, and one of the candidates was an African American male, and these were black folks sitting around playing cards, and this mother, she was older of all of us who were sitting there. She said, I wouldn't vote for a black man. And that just threw me into I said, what? I said, well, why not? She said, because you can't trust them. I said, wait, whoa. I said, you telling me that you wouldn't vote for a black man? How come you can't trust me? You just can't trust me. I wouldn't trust me. I said, so let me help you to understand it. So you telling me that you would vote for a white man over a black man? She said, yeah, because I can't trust black men. I said, and I'm sitting there, and I know she had sons. And I said, first I prayed. And I was like, well, I need some help right now because this is bothering me. And I said, well, let me ask you this question then. I said, you have sons. She said, yeah, but I wouldn't vote for them either. And I said, well, let me ask you this question. Since you can't trust your sons, who raised them? That's crazy.
What'd you say? You said that's crazy?
Yeah, she got quiet. The whole room got quiet. And I said, thank you, Jesus. Because that question needed to be asked and answered. Even if it wasn't answered verbally, it needed to be answered. Because now the question is, and here in Jeffersonville and Southern Indiana, how are we raising our children? You see, are we raising them to be trustworthy or non-trustworthy? Are we raising them to create a communal environment? I love that phrase, by the way. Are we creating that? And we can't just sit here and I get, I've been trying to just be quiet. We can't sit here and just pretend that what's happening is not happening. The narrative has to take place. And I thank you for doing this, but we need more of it. Yeah. And you do need, the reason there aren't a lot of African American men doing things, because we don't see enough African American men doing things. And we need to be out there. Here's the other thing too. Yes, talking about the red line and so forth. We absolutely need African Americans in government. And it's hard, I know you try, but it's hard to start here in the local government. It's hard to start anywhere, but we gotta start. And the thing is, if we're gonna do it, now we're gonna have to educate the people that we want there and support them. And when I say support, I don't just mean, yeah, I got you, but no, you're gonna have to come up with some cash. You're gonna have to help them out, because that's what it takes. Money is power. Money is power. Okay,
No, let me hold there. I got 3 questions. Can I?
So I have a question for different people. And so I say Bradford first. So you mentioned being, you see someone being destructive, you check them. And so with that, that's something for me, because I went through a sobriety class. I had to go for my addiction. And something that I seen in there was just people, communication with them. It was predominantly white, and the level of transparency in that, I was astonished, and I learned from it. And I said, I want to take that back to my community. Now, I also went to church after that while I was in that program too. Now, I said all that to say, right now what I'm doing is I'm evaluating the people that I should have that check with. Because while I was in that sobriety, was one, some people may not want to check. They might not be looking to check. So my question to you is, do you check people whether they want to or not, or are you using that selective standpoint?
For me, this is me personally. I check whether they want to or not, because I don't see the check as being punitive. I see it as an opportunity. I see it as an opportunity for me to connect. If I can have the opportunity to connect, I can create an ongoing dialogue, or it may just be a dialogue just to make them think, what about this, so on and so forth. Let me give you an example. We moved out of our neighborhood, 2325 Bowling Avenue, right there on 15 and Hill, in that particular area. We moved out of our neighborhood for this reason alone. That neighborhood drug dealer, and again, everybody was scared of this cat. And I'm like, man, I'm not living in a neighborhood where I'm gonna be afraid of anybody. So I just go up and started talking to them, man. I started asking them their purpose. They sitting on the porch, they got the ankle bracelets on, man. I started asking their purpose. You could have a pin drop. Nobody ever asked me that, so on and so forth. So I'm having a dialogue with them. But one day, me in the neighborhood, the head dude, we got into an argument, right? And I was sharing with them something my uncle said to me growing up. He said, 2 things I'm not. He said, scared as both of them. So I'm standing here, and I got a concealed carry. So I got my heater on, right? And we going back and forth. I ain't backing down, he ain't backing down, right? And then it dawned on me. It was like the Lord just spoke to me right there. We calmed down, but here's what he said, man. If I engage in a altercation with this guy, right? What about the collateral damage? What about my son walking down the street? What about my daughter walking down the street? You know what I'm saying? So not only do we have to be experts at addressing issues, we have to also become expert at de-escalating issues.
Exactly.
which is a whole nother skill set. So I was able to de-escalate that particular situation, come on back down, and we sitting there laughing with one another, but I made a connection. You know, I wasn't afraid to connect. And I think, again, you have to open up the opportunities for those situations. But let me say this too. You gotta be selective as well. It's not an either or, it's a both and. Sometimes, man, you know, call it intuition or whatever, something to tell you, man, you need to keep it moving. And you need to be able to hear that particular voice. But I don't want to be the type of person I'm afraid to confront. I'm afraid to de-escalate. I'm afraid to care. I'm afraid to love. I don't want to be that person. I want to be the person who steps out and say, yo, look, man, I'm telling you out of love. I'm telling you because I care. I'm telling you, man, because I want to put this on your mind, and maybe you'll choose to make different decisions in the future.
Can I ask you to jump back in there real quick?
Well, I guess going back to the values, and I think it was wonderful articulated, and I just agree that I think there has to be a theoretical conversation with a very practical conversation as well, and that is preparing our youth, preparing our young people, preparing our young men in particular for what is reality in growing up in the United States of America, growing up in this world. I was just looking at some statistics again, and I think we talk about even the black graduate rate and how it's risen, but yet black unemployment rate has hovered in this same particular area. We're pointing our young people to higher education, but then they're not prepared for systematic racism and injustices happening on the job. I think that's where I fear, even for my daughter, because she's being spoon-fed in her school, that all things are equal. And we can't raise our kids from a value standpoint like that. It's just not reality. We can say from a theoretical standpoint, you know, it's all equal, hard work gets you there, it's gonna be great. If you put your mind to it, you can achieve everything, anything. It's not like that for black folks. And as much as we don't like that, I think it's the same thing with black men. I hate the fact that I had to sit down with my nephew and talk about, you know, when you're in your car, this is how you deal when the police pull up. Somebody else said, well, you shouldn't have to do that, and I'm not gonna do my son like that because I just don't think that's right. It doesn't matter what you think is right. It's reality. It's real. And we have to, from a value standpoint, inspire, certainly, but also make sure that we are being as real and practical as possible. We have 3 young brothers from our church that's here today. And a part of my responsibility is to prepare them for both the pie in the sky stuff and, hey, when you walk through the store, you can't act like they act. When you walk out the store, you can't do what they do. What you see on YouTube when that young white man confronts the police officer and is putting his hand in his face and he's laughing and all this kind of stuff, and nothing happens to him, that won't be you, which means you have to act this way. And I think we do an issue to our young men when we're not teaching those values along with the inspirational, wonderful things like achievement, family, and all that good stuff.
You know, to piggyback off of that, Tim, on that same note, we taught our sons, you got to be twice as good. Yeah. You got to work twice as hard to be considered half as good. And they that was ingrained into them, and they rose, and they rose beautifully, and they rose to the occasion, and they were awesome. But they knew that sometimes they were going to be disappointed of the selection process, even though they worked much harder and they were much better.
Let me take a question.
Yes, kind of segue or connected to the topic of trust. I just finished my first year as a school administrator, and my voice is kind of out for the first day of summer break, so to speak. And prior to that, I was in high school where I could see a lot of our kids I didn't want to say it's too late, but it was like they were so far gone as far as education, and the gap was so wide. There was so much. It was so hard to catch them up, and they were so disconnected that a lot of that mentoring that you're talking about, the conversation you had with them, needed to be had, but you didn't have time enough to do it. So my question is more so, now I'm in elementary school, and back to your point about trust. is that I'm seeing a lot of kids that they don't trust the people around them. They don't trust at home. They don't have a sense of community at home. And so how do we then build that trust in the community from an early age when they're not our kids, when they're not necessarily our family members?
I just came back, I'm on a part of the Law 502, which is a part of JCPS. Myself, Dr. Polio, a few others went to Harvard to do this study. And again, in Jefferson County, first grade, second grade, generally black kids, white counterparts, virtually the same. For whatever reason, that third grade age, once they get to third grade, there's a tremendous drop-off. Then it seems statistically, the teachers are just almost, and of course not you, but stop teaching and start managing behavior instead of actually teaching all through high school with the focus, get them to 12th grade, get them out of here. I think as a community, and I jumped on this because this is something that I've been really wrestling with. I think it is extremely important that community, not just black and white, but especially black, we have got to get to our kids in that 3rd to 4th grade range now. And it's not just school. I've made it a priority even at our church, is that doing parenting classes on when you have young kids, because again, from a practical standpoint, it's not a matter of opinion. Something's happening in that 3rd to 4th grade range where they are lagging, they're dropping, and I think talk about investment and building trust. I think we have to be present in the school system. We have to be present in creating programs. We have to be present in empowering parents. We have to be present in supporting parents, because until that cycle stops, when we're trying to put mentoring programs together in high school, there's nothing wrong with that. We're already behind the 8 ball for years. And by that time, whatever trust issues have existed 4th and 5th grade, they have compounded by the time they've gotten to high school. Not to mention, the counselor has come and said, listen, why even consider college? Why even do this? The only thing you can do is whatever the case may be. And that's where, from a practical standpoint, I guess for me, it would be, that's where the investment, that's where the trust has to be built. Both school, having more teachers like you, more administrators like you have to be seen, and being present.
Absolutely. I work for JCPS and I consult with schools. My daughter is a 5th grade teacher in JCPS. I agree wholeheartedly with what Tim just said around the 3rd and 4th. And we noticed that Jawan's Kunjufu and the conspiracy to destroy black boys highlighted that. Jawan's Kunjufu, the conspiracy to destroy black boys, said 3rd and 4th grade. You know, and based on reading levels, he articulated that they're building prisons.
Yes.
You know, but let me add on to that. When you think about the continuum of education, number one, it's never too late. It's never too late to inspire greatness. It's never too late. That's number one. But number two is schools. Nathan and Julia Hare would argue are killing fields for especially black children. And if we're prepared, if schools are still adopting the model to prepare them for the industrial age, schools are outdated anyway. We have to begin to prepare our students around focusing on their strengths and their talents and their gifts, and look at them as individuals, not as some average. And we have to explore the third option, which I think is an option that is challenging for schools to explore, and that's the option of entrepreneurship. Because schools have been designed to be more about compliance than they are creativity. The third option around entrepreneurship is all about creative. Let's take your gifts and your strengths and let's create something and take it to the marketplace. I think John just said, man, we was just fixing lawnmower engines and cutting grass. And then somehow we sold the business to buy a house. Y'all missed that. Y'all missed that. You know what I'm saying? He said we sold the business to buy a house when they was your age. You know what I'm saying? Because he was inspired to now turn that lawnmower thing into a business. I think we have to begin to think, how do we operate outside the structural norms? Because schools are designed to create employees.
Yes.
They're not designed to create owners. You know what I'm saying? And as we now engage our kids, we say, yo, look, man, we need you to own the business. Here's the skill set. You strong enough. This is your strength. This is your gift. This is the way you wired. You don't learn like everybody else. You have to learn in a different way. I think when we do that, we give them a competitive chance at being successful in their own eyes. Does that make sense? And we have to stop equating success with acquiring a bunch of stuff. Because that's not success, that's just getting a bunch of stuff. No, and just like you get a bunch of stuff, you can lose a bunch of stuff. So success should be tied, again, I bring up this word, to your particular purpose.
Yeah.
And your vision. If you have a small vision, you don't need a whole lot of provision. If you got a Mercedes-Benz vision, then you need Mercedes-Benz resources. But if you got a bucket vision, you don't need a whole lot of resources. And that don't make you less than the person with the Mercedes-Benz. Does that make sense?
Well, because it's not about money, it's about managing resources.
Right.
Where we get caught up in a money structure.
Yep.
That's a real issue, right? So, but going back, I'm gonna jump on two things. Your education piece. I remember when Suge was in 3rd grade at Spring Hill, and she wanted to do a project. They had to do a Black History project, and she came home and she said, "Dad, I'm gonna do my project on Queen Nzinga." I said, "Who?" Okay, so let's do some research. Who's Queen Nzinga? Baby girl, I already knew who she was, right? West African queen, fought slavery, only, free country, blah, 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 negotiated a whole deal with the Portuguese, yada, yada, yada. So she goes to school, and the teacher says, "No, you can't do that. That ain't a real person." So I say that because for me as a Black man in a Black family, sometimes we put way too much trust on an institution that was never for us. We are battery cells, for my opinion, to the American society. And until we adopt entrepreneurial ways of thinking, we use our creativity, take it back, and then push it forward in a way that it benefits our community. Nothing changes. Maybe 7 years ago, I had a client named Jeff, and respect this guy all day long. And business was struggling. I was doing some marketing and PR for him, and he turned and he looked at me and he said, "Miguel, white gentleman," he said, "I respect everything you do for us. I love what you do for us, but we got to sever ties." And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I got to get a business to somebody that looks like me." I said, "Wow." I ain't even mad at it. I get it. So I walk out of his office and I'm thinking, who can I do business with that look like me? Too many of us. Because we're not thinking like that. But that's where we have to change the narrative, because we do think like that.
Well, we'll get back to the educational piece as well. My hometown is a small town, Lebanon, Kentucky. And one of the things there is now we're looking at education and we're fighting some of those same, statistics with the demographics. So one of the things that we're looking at is my sister is an assistant principal in Georgetown High School. In 2 years, we're going to retire her, me and 3 other Black-owned businesses from Lebanon, and we're going to move her into a spot as the head counselor at the elementary school, and we're going to fund it. So therefore, we can begin to look at the data, see where kids are, what the reading level, the STEM level, and we can create STEM programs because we've got a paid resource inside. And we've been watering this thing for 3 years. The principal, we've been feeding money. The politicians in the town, we've been feeding money. You got to pay to play. You got to water it. So therefore, we'll water it. We've been watering the political system for 3 to 5 years. Now my sister is going as a head counselor. She's talking to a group of 3 or 4 others that will be retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. So if we fund counselors at the elementary school level, we change the game. Guys, we got to change the game. We can't just keep saying this is the structure. Change the game. But also, we gotta create dreamers.
That's right.
We gotta keep telling our kids they gotta dream. What do they want to be? I want John to be what I am. John said, Dad, I don't want to join your company. What I will create will likely buy your company.
There it is. There it is.
And my daughter, she's a dancer. Floyd Central Dazzle. That's a money pin. That shit costs $10,000 a month. But you know what John Gunn's thinking? I'm putting a lease on a building. I'm gonna rent the space to him.
Yes.
And what my daughter pay 10 grand, I'm make 100 grand. So we have to change the game. Change the game.
Let y'all know right now, I'm hanging out with John. Where I'm at, I'm with Gunn.
I mean, we have to look at things differently.
Yes.
We can't do it like our daddy done it, and our children sure the hell can't do it the way we do it.
Oh, no.
Game has changed.
I know we running tight on time. If anybody's got any other questions, because I don't want to keep these gentlemen any longer than I promised them I will keep them. They can stay as long as they want. But
How do we work together better as a community to do things for each other to help advance everything? I mean, I stick out like a sore thumb in the room, I guess.
Well, no,
I mean,
Well, now.
yeah,
But I'm here to support. I'm here to help.
people
Okay, so we got, yeah, clarify.
I'm running for election in New Albany. How do I go above and beyond and talk about this? How do I bring it out there and say, we don't have any black, you know, like bring it to the white people where they don't feel like, oh, you.
Yeah, well, that,
You know, we get called, you're in love.
in love.
You know,
Right,
you're
right,
this,
right,
you're
right.
that. And so, like, how do we be an advocate just as much and in partnership and, yeah.
I say, from my experience, give people a chance. Help partner people that haven't been able to get the opportunities with the opportunities. If you know someone that can help someone that no one else may not be, or they feel like they got limited opportunities, be the connector.
I think she's talking about something totally different. I know where you're going with that. She's,
As a whole.
yeah, well, but the other thing too is, what she's dealing with, or will be dealing with, is white folk who don't think like her, and who will see anything that she might do for a black cause as a betrayal to white people.
Not even for a black person to step up in that role and say, hey, I'm going to be the first. They already issue it as a threat because somebody else already in there to take you down.
Yeah.
And it works a lot of people then to come help pull you back up and rally you all up. We're in Southern Indiana.
Southern Indiana is tough for black folk. I'm just saying, it really is. It is difficult.
Very true.
It is difficult here. I mean, and I'm going to say Jeffersonville is hardest of the three cities in this area, because it's just something that's been ingrained that you got to reverse. And that's what I was talking about, because that story that I gave you was almost 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, and it's still happening today. So to your point, I would tell you to get someone on your campaign who looks like me or him or her, who can help to educate your white friends
Yeah,
that we're not all threats,
yeah.
that we have feelings and that we have education and that we can contribute. That's the bottom line. You can't do it. I don't care what you say, because you're gonna be seen as a sellout. Just like if we go to too many of our black friends about somebody white, what do we do? We're sellouts. You know, so Oreos.
I'm hungry. I ain't eat you. Hold on, let me take
Let me say this. Let me respond real quick to that. I think you have to reframe the argument. You got to reframe the argument in terms that people begin to embrace and understand it. So I'm not an in lover, I'm a people lover. You know, when it comes to, it just makes economic sense to have diversity. Companies with more diversity outperform companies with less diversity by 25 to 50% better. You know, they make more money. You got to reframe the argument so people can begin to understand the benefit of them investing in all of us rising. Warren Buffett said it this way. Warren Buffett said on one occasion, he said, man, and this was his whole thing against racism. He said, man, I wonder what we could have accomplished in the United States if we wouldn't have left half of our citizens on the bench. He said, we left the whole population on the bench. There's so much more we can achieve. He didn't make a social, he didn't make a moral argument. He made a capitalistic argument and competitive argument that's true.
There's a flaw in that argument though, bro.
Tell me more.
They ain't leave us on the bench, they stole our shit.
They leave
us on the bench.
We were the resource.
These people on the back of the book, right? The folks is rotating here. They ain't put them on the bench, they stole it. We didn't land. Charles Drew, who created not blood plasma, but blood transfusion, died because he went to a white hospital who wouldn't do his own invention.
Yeah.
Black people were we were a commodity. We built this country and then became something less than.
Yes.
Let me say
Hold on, Tim. I just want to make the argument around what the question you asked, how do we help get other people on board? How do we cooperate? You know what I mean? I don't think we get people.
Do your thing, and then
I don't think we get people to cooperate, Miguel, by running up in there telling, yo, you stole our shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. There ain't no argument there. I got to reframe that. You know?
I would say this is my brother. And I'm gonna play devil's advocate. And I'm not gonna play devil's advocate. This is something that I struggle with. My mentor, Dr. F. Bruce Williams, calls me Stokely all the time because of my thought with this. And I'm gonna be very honest. I'm gonna be very, very honest. A few white people, conscious, will change nothing.
Yep.
It's nothing. A few white people that are allies will change nothing. Going to what you just said, if you ask me, micro, macro, read Ta-Nehisi Coates, The Case for Reparations. If we want to see true systematic change in this country, James Baldwin said, you cannot fix what you will not face. There has been hundreds of years of economic raping of black people. We're now conscious and we're saying, hey, let's act like none of that happened. Let's act like you have not been put at an extreme disadvantage. So let's all start on this moral ground. It's impossible. Doesn't matter how many public offices, it doesn't matter how well our hearts are. If there's going to be change in this country, there has to be a serious conversations about repairing what was done. Because other than that, you will have peppered white folks that are great, they want to see change, but you'll still have to deal with people that are talking about you being the in-law.
So how do we create that intentionally?
But you have to support candidates that have like-minded thoughts. We have to figure out ways to infiltrate areas where that is being shot down. There's a woman, and again, I don't know much about her, but at least I gave her props because she's a white woman, and she's running on, I can't remember her name.
Marianne Williams.
She's running on reparations. And she is slowly but surely changing the narrative and changing the perspective of both black and white people. Very, very snail's pace. But I'm telling you, not to be the negative one on the panel, there are micro things that can be done, but if we're gonna see real change in this country was not built this way with those founding fathers that we deified, as if what they wanted to happen has not happened. What's happening right now, what's been happening, is exactly what it was designed to do. And no matter what we do, no matter how many times we sing Kumbaya, there will be some of us that have the forward movement to get to a certain place, but by and large, the whole of us will not get there because we are operating and building on a wicked base. All right. Period.
This is what I wanted to ask you all. Because see, this is my status, and if I'm speaking now, you need to go. Well, this is my status on it because I have a multicultural friendship. Yet at the same time, I told my friend who is white, because he asked me the same question, and I said, Dr. Frances Wilson said something sparked me. Somebody came to her, and this was in the 80s, asked her the exact same thing that was white. And she said, tell me what you all talking about in this seat. And what that means is because, and I see it as I've grown older, is that for the most part, especially with white males, it's a brotherhood. It's an indirect brotherhood. You all talk about certain things. And as my friend, he told me something when they were talking about police brutality, and he didn't even know it. You said something that went over that people said what John said. And he was telling me about how they adjust to it in regards of communication, of avoiding it with black males.
Yeah.
And so I took that and I told him the same thing. I said, there's nothing that you all can do to help us because it starts with us, which was going to my question of what you said about the systematic strategies. So for me personally, I believe that anything that I do it because I go for adults. So I go for black males, black females, but more so black males, and encouraging them and getting them out of the emotional hurt that they've had, mental hurt that they've had, and develop after that. Because I don't believe that we can do anything financially, military, until we settle what's wrong with us. And that thing is like just communicating and learning that, like trust. So my question is, for those systematic strategies, how in you all's experience and knowledge and perspective, how do you think internally the black community not being helped with anybody else, what strategies do you
I think the black community is tired.
Right.
If it comes, let's just talk about unemployment. Let's talk about unfair hiring practices. If black people are the only ones marching, rallying, writing petitions, raising hell about that practice, it will never change. If black people are the only ones rallying, marching, picketing, whatever the case may be, criminal justice, nothing will ever change. If white people decide, you know what's happening with unemployment, what's happening with these unfair housing, we're going to put a stop to this, we're going to rally. We're gonna march just like the teachers did here or in Louisville with the wage with Governor Bennett. They stormed the Capitol. If white people started doing that, the same way that white people deal when Trump was elected and they started wearing the little hats for the sexual, what was that?
Me Too.
Rally, the Me Too movement. Those things change things. What happens is that black people we are left to the side to march for, rally for our own injustices and nobody else. In my opinion, there has to be a greater coming together if we identify, this is not an opinion. Statistically, you can just literally point to different places and say, this is where the injustice is happening. The question is, why isn't there more disheveled, why isn't there more upheaval about these particular areas, and why is it only black people? So if I was gonna answer your questions, get you a list of about 10 things that we see are absolutely, positively affecting black folks and rally around that.
Let me add to that, and I'm gonna take an economic position, and I want to thank Republic Bank and Scott for being here because they are part of the reason we're able to help make this happen. And so as we started having a conversation, Scott was like, I think this is something we can do. That's the start. That's the micro level, right? But here's a macro level. We live in Southern Indiana, and when our state reps, our senators, our mayors, our city council begin to pass economic policy that deteriorates the smaller black part of the community, which happens to be African American community. If white folks want to stop that, all they need to do is stop funding it. If white folks want to support the growth of the black community, all they need to do is change the policy and write a policy that is actually going to benefit the black community. So when Mike Pence in Indiana passed the Freedom of Religion Act, that gave the state of Indiana the right to discriminate based on religion. But we know slavery happened based on religion. So if you do the history and you understand that, you know what he just passed in the state of Indiana. And then we roll out the fact that the state of Indiana doesn't have a hate crime law, right? And then we want to pass one, but we don't want to identify or classify it. If white folks want to change that, they need no more than to change it. The thing is that they don't want to change it. I spoke in New Albany when they were talking about changing it, and all the Republicans came down. There were some Democrats in the space, and again, one of those times where I had a speech and I derailed it because I had a question, and the question I asked is, we won't pass a hate crime law. I don't care what party's involved in it, and we won't pass one, but we'll look at passing one only if it does not identify the people it protects. And so my question was, well, who are they protecting? The people who are doing the discriminating? Because we know the Klan just rallied through here, right? A good friend of ours who was heavily involved in the party, when the Klan rallied in Madison a couple years ago and I wrote a letter, she pulled me aside and said, you know, we wish you wouldn't have done that. You know, but then she later said to me, she said, Miguel, I never had to ask who in my family was Klan. She not racist, but she ain't never had to ask who it was, because they knew. White folks
benefits from racism.
Yeah, white folks want to change it. They need nothing to do but to wake up and change it. But that's a choice. But you have to understand white privilege, right? It ain't about being wealthy. Part of it is. But you have to understand, you wake up every day, the proverbial you, and you're not concerned with having a gun pointed to your head if you get pulled over. But we are.
You're not concerned with being pulled over.
True story.
And I'm gonna say why you should change it. I'm gonna say why you should change it. Because it gives you a strategic and competitive advantage when you think about a global economy.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned Charles Drew.
Yes.
You know, black genius and black excellence exists. And I think when we nurture it the right way, we will be able to solve some of the challenges that we face: diabetes, obesity, global warming. But as long as we have those particular policies that are holding them down and locking them out of opportunity and not nurturing that genius and not nurturing that leadership, then it puts us at a disadvantage. It's a severe disadvantage, because when I go over to India, I'm looking at kids now who speak 4 or 5 different languages, who are astute when it comes to politics, you know, who are astute when it comes, and now what happens is we want to change immigration law so they can come over here, and compete for dollars that we've locked those citizens who are here out of.
So imagine this, the W.E.B. Du Bois School, that was hotly contested. Now it's shown that it is far exceeding what was projected. So they've introduced possibly having a sort of component school for young black girls. There's even more hotly contested people lining up to shut that school down. If you ask me, and going to those school board meetings, when you see a bunch of black folks that come and say, no, we need this, we need this. If you want to know how to help with something like that, it can't just be black people. Because again, that is directly connected to education. We know education is connected to poverty, all these different things. But if we can't even get acknowledgement that these kinds of initiatives help in the long run, and we're fighting at that level, I don't want a group coming down to the West End just handing out sandwiches and saying, hey, we're here to help. Show up at the school board, show up at these places, rally friends and family, come out and say, hey, this benefits all of us. And to me, yeah. So
And when you come to the school board, bring a sandwich.
bring a sandwich.
Look, I know we gotta wrap
No
up.
pork sandwich.
We gotta wrap up, man.
And, you know, I think this is, I think it all starts with a conversation, and we're having a conversation
Yeah.
today. And we appreciate the partnership that your bank has.
Yes.
I think the guys who have a little money and economic influence, we should be working with groups like the Republic,
Yes.
an institution like the Republic, and having more conversation with Scott's boss and his boss and the shareholders on the board. And how do we get not just blacks in school, but blacks on boards, where we can begin to have more influence? Because the banks fund some of the private programs in the schools.
Yes.
So the economic piece, the dollars matter. So this partnership, we can do more of this, and we can look at ways when we do have blacks with the credit scores, how do we get them to lend? And if you got small businesses, people coming in, align them with people like me who have been doing business for 20 years, therefore I can help them as their startups, the things to look out for to be sustainable. So you can connect the dots. If the public, and what'll benefit the public is you'll get the money. Because if I keep $2 or $3 million in the bank, I can keep it in the public, not being seen.
John, just for record purposes, what fraternity did you play?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Omega Psi.
I just want to Omega Psi Phi.
That's what we're doing today.
That's what we do. That's what we do. Black and gold, alpha, phi, alpha. and you notice they take 2 for 1.
It's partnership.
This was, I think this is the beginning of some great. We talk about these things. I talk about these things. My family talks about these things often. Looking at how we plant seeds to build tomorrow. How do we move from being employee to entrepreneur? How do we take those first level businesses and get them to second generation, third, fourth, and that they are able to grow so that we can build our own. There's nothing wrong with having our own. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about how do we develop trust and build trust amongst each other so that we can change the narrative that black folk don't trust each other, right? I look at our community, backtrack. Atlanta was an experiment. The black community and the white community in Atlanta over 100 years ago was an experiment. They said if we let Reconstruction or the issues of civil rights destroy our economics, we stupid. I'm smiling. If we want to grow, we have to have goals and have our own experience right there. And so when I started having conversations, I was talking to Tia, my wife, and I said, it's ready. I'm ready to go. I can't do this here. I hate this place. And then I realized that all my life I've lived in small white towns and it's always been the same thing. And that's all over the U.S. And then I was drunk one night and I was watching this movie on Netflix. And I'm listening, because I'm not watching, but I'm listening about black history in America and the migration from the South. And then I hear this thing that they're talking about how Atlanta was intentional. And how they were going to create it no matter what the racial issues that were happening in America, that we're not going to allow it there. And so I woke up that morning with a bit of a headache. And I said, I don't have to leave, but I have to make the next step to make what I want this to be intentional. And I've got to find people who want the same thing, or who will at least remove the people who will get in the way. Message. Because sometimes our biggest struggle is the people who are tearing down the doors that we're trying to open.
But you know what? I would tend to challenge that statement and say sometimes it's not the other people that get in the way. Sometimes we get in our own way.
I agree. We got to work.
Most of us.
That's that mentoring game right there. That's that
attitude.
That's that check.
Attitude.
Yes. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm gonna give them the last
It's
word.
just like I know one day we're gonna be in business together. It's not a question.
It says,
We talked about.
I'm waiting on him.
We talked about it.
It ain't me.
And this is even church politics. We talk about starting an investment group and a small company in a Sunday school class.
Yes.
Then
By the way, that's my Sunday school class.
Yes, that's it.
Talking about preaching.
And I get some heat from the local council, the principal office, that we're gonna start something without getting the approvals of the principal office.
Yeah, that's something.
So this could have been a beautiful thing, but it wasn't given birth through the central office for a blessed amount of time. So therefore, I had to shake it loose. I couldn't tell the members what happened, but that's politics within our own house.
Nah, that's when you just tear up the
Speaking
house.
on behalf of Pastor Findley's church and my church, we bless you, God. Come on.
This is all we gotta do. Like again, let's get out. So this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do as we wrap up. I want to thank everybody. We got 3 prizes to give away. So when we close out, you know, I got one gift for a lady, 1 gift for a man, and then there's a gift for whoever gets it. But before we close out, I want to thank everybody for coming. But I want each one of you to give me in your quickest response, deepest, quickest response. 3 things that folks can walk away from today understanding how we might get to a better tomorrow that represents Black community, Black men. And I'll leave it at that. I'm gonna start with John from looking at it.
Okay, I would say languages. This is a big word. International exposure. Languages. Languages will get you there. Free of charge. So young people, languages. This is a whole different world to live in. This is a global community. And I'd say education, and 3rd, relationships. Build relationships at a young age. Build them, and that builds trust. Because you're gonna need them through the journey of life. Those are my 3.
Mr. Seawright.
Well, first of all, we kind of have to recognize each other. When I hear people say, I don't see color, then I have an issue with it. Because then you don't see me, I don't see you, but you don't see people who are of other ethnicities. We are different. And when we recognize our differences, regardless of what they are, and begin to embrace them, you know, I love my wife, but we think different. She's from a different area. I'm from the coast, and she's from the Delta, and we just think different. But I respect her thoughts, and I respect what she brings to the table. So I think if we start that kind of dialogue to understanding one another, that's the other thing. The other thing is to not be afraid to step out of our comfort zone. You know, we just don't sometimes. We're very comfortable where we are, and we don't want anybody to upset that apple cart. And I, you know, along with, I'm just trying to find some different things that he's talking about, because I agree with what he just said. And the final thing is to just do something. Just move to do something. And the more I would say the more we do stuff like this, get together, don't be afraid to get together. And we don't have enough get-togethers in our community. And y'all know what I'm talking about when I say get together. Shoot, we used to get together. We used to get together all the time. I mean, just we don't have enough get-togethers. Just, you know, we used to have what's called impromptu no-notice hospitality checks. You know what? Somebody show up and they bring the dessert. You got to supply the meat. You know, and we don't do that. Tim?
I would say pie, and that's something that I communicate to our young men in the church and in the programs we do. Purpose, identity, and excellence. Your pie is not minimized by the opinions of other people. That's with everything that's been said, just to kind of take my own little angle there. Your purpose, your identity, the excellence in which you've been called to operate with, you've got to achieve it no matter what. And that's what I'd say.
Nice.
I would say cake. Because somebody took pie. piggyback off what Tim said, I'm boy, that number one purpose. My son, right there, my son is bilingual. He speaks fluent semi-Spanish, and he graduated from Center College with a finance degree. And I always tell him, man, chase purpose, not paper. Man was not put here to make a living, but to live his making, and living his making makes his living. When you live out of purpose, then you now can, it will add to your prosperity. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say was faith. Faith. You have, faith gives you the emotional capacity to not only get to your destination, but now to sustain and build on that particular destination. Structural engineers argue that when you pour the foundation, 80% of the building is already complete. When you have a foundation of faith, you can build a skyscraper of success and achievement. And then finally, I would say love. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. From a theologian standpoint, we would say God is love. That's what the Bible teaches us. God is love. Love yourself. Love your people, the place that you come from. But also let that extend now to love of others. When you are loving, there's so many creative things that flow from love. Hate, darkness, evil will never prevail against love. Love is the only thing that will not fail.
On that note, can we do some giveaways? Because I ain't saying that. I love the fact that y'all came up here. I love the fact that I get to talk to y'all in front of people. That's kind of cool.
Excuse me, are you gonna do this again?
We really need to do this again, and we need to, I would honestly say, we need to do it with a specific purpose.
I was looking at it too.
And spend 4 hours with it.